Hello and welcome to Sonder. My name is Maggie. I am a knitter, bibliophile, new doctor, sometimes sewist, who lives in Denver, Colorado. And this is my little journal where I keep track of what I've been knitting, what I've been reading, and just general life updates. I would like to start off by saying that this is a swearing-friendly podcast. I got some comments on the last podcast that people felt like I was being unprofessional because I talk about being a doctor and also curse occasionally. And yeah, I'm a doctor and I also curse sometimes. So if you don't like that, this is not the podcast for you. So yeah, I am right in the middle of kind of a transition time. So for those of you who don't know, for those of you who are new, welcome. It's so amazing to talk with everyone and hear where people are coming from and what kind of things they're knitting on and what kind of things they're reading. I have gotten so many book recommendations and I am loving it. I'm always looking for book recommendations, so if you have read something that you think I will like, please tell me what it is. I like all genres. I read the least of nonfiction, but of the fiction genres, I read literally everything, from fantasy to sci-fi to historical fiction to literary fiction to classics. Like, I read everything. So please, if you have read something that is fiction and you loved it, tell me about it. Generally for fiction, or nonfiction, I am much more picky. Part of that is that I read a lot at work. I am the type of doctor who is always researching new things and the type of doctor who admits that I don't know everything. And so a lot of my day is spent reading nonfiction, medical journals, and other medical resources. And so generally for nonfiction, I reserve that for learning from own voices about cultures and backgrounds and life experiences that are different than my own. So generally I read several memoirs every year, usually by authors who are very different from myself. So like, for instance, some of my favorites that I've read in the last year or so are All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson, This Is How We Fight for Our Lives by Saeed Jones, In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. Those are all like fantastic nonfiction options that I have loved, but just to give you examples of nonfictions I might like. Yeah, so I am in sort of a period of transition. I am in a dual residency where I'm studying to be both an internal medicine doctor and a pediatrician. Sorry about that. Shawnee just got home from a afternoon with his mom. So you'll see him making himself some food in the background. But yeah, so like I was saying, I am at a time of transition. So I am learning to be both an internal medicine doctor, meaning a doctor for adults, a specialist for adults, and a pediatrician, so a specialist for kids. And what that means is that generally an internal medicine residency is 3 years and a peds residency is 3 years, and I do both in 2 years. And every 3 months, I switch back and forth between medicine and peds. So for the last 3 months, and really the only time that I've been making this podcast, I have been on the pediatric side. So generally in the Well Baby Nursery and at the at Children's Hospital. And I just finished a month at Children's Hospital and am now switching back to the adult side of things. So I will start off with university wards, so taking care of adults who are hospitalized at the University of Colorado Hospital, and I start off on 2 weeks of nights. So that will be interesting. nights are something that I am very used to dealing with. So even before I started medical school, I worked at a homeless shelter up in Boulder, Colorado. And working at a homeless shelter essentially entails like keeping the peace. And because homeless shelters are shelters, they require people to be there overnight. And so in general, I have worked a lot of nights. This is not something that is new to me or different. And I'm very used to it. I'm very used to it. Even though I feel like it always is hard, it's actually easier for me to do this job where I'm working a stretch of nights than the months or year that I spent working at the shelter where it's like here and there you're having to work overnights. That is like much more challenging in general. So yeah, switching over to the adult side and gonna do some night work, which will be fun. Nights in general are really cool because you are really the person in charge of taking care of people during the night, and you have a little bit more autonomy, and you're putting out a lot of little fires overnight and dealing with anything that comes up with a large group of patients. And so it's really rewarding and really fun work. So despite it being at night and that being a challenge, I'm actually really looking forward to working the night shifts. So yeah, I'm also a little nervous, I think, for someone who deals with anxiety on a fairly regular basis. The kind of switching back and forth that Med-Peds residency requires is just like every time you switch back to adult medicine or back to peds, it's just a strange thing because you have been thinking about things very differently for the last 3 months and have had very different experiences than your colleagues. And for me, at this time, I have only spent half of my time in medicine and half of my time in peds, while my colleagues who are not in this joint residency have spent their whole year doing medicine. And so sometimes it can feel a little bit like I'm behind, but I don't know. I think that's also just like me being in my own head, which is not new. That is something that I deal with on a regular basis. But yeah, I'm excited. I think for me, I really love pediatrics and I love the fun silliness that kids bring, but I really enjoy the stories and the conversations when I'm on the adult side. I think, you know, adults, especially elderly adults who are hospitalized, most adults who are hospitalized are usually a little bit older, or if they're younger, generally have really interesting life experiences, be that homelessness and addiction or chronic disease. It's just generally people in the hospital have really interesting stories to tell, and I'm a person who just loves stories. I love reading, I love consuming art, and storytelling is such a beautiful art form that I feel super special to be able to experience with my patients. So yeah, I'm really excited about that. Generally, I feel like I talk about fun things that have been going on in my life, but truthfully, not a whole lot has been happening because I've been working a lot and it's COVID. I will say it's been really fun because many different family members and friends are vaccinated. And so I do feel like my world is opening up in this beautiful way. It was daylight savings, so now it's light until like 7 p.m. at night, which just makes me feel good. So I'm actually excited for spring. You know, I feel like normally I talk about how I love winter, and I truly do love winter, but the last couple of snows have been real doozies, and it's great. I feel like this is why I love living in a place that has all 4 seasons, because right at the end of winter, when I'm like really, really ready to be done with winter, then it's springtime. So I'm really, really enjoying the spring. I feel like I'm wearing a very springtime garment. So yeah, with that, I will move into what I am wearing. This dress is actually a thrifted dress that I am almost certain is handmade out of quilting cotton. So it's this really beautiful quilting cotton that has tulips on it, and I just feel like it's so perfect for the spring. And then the other thing that I am wearing is my completely finished Kess cardigan by Mary Tanaka. This I just finished knitting and talked about in my last episode, and the only thing that I did is I put on buttons and sewed a ribbon onto the button band. So I will show you this, and I have to say thank you to Jackie, who in the last episode, I was like trying to figure out what buttons I wanted to use, and then Jackie commented that she really liked the like football buttons that were on the old like 1960s cardigans. And for me, I was like that is exactly what I want. And like for me, I like forgot that that button type even exists in the world. And so I just love this community. It's so fun to be able to connect with people and have people recommend things and have you realize that that's what you wanted all along in your life. And so let me show these off. These are leather buttons that are like old vintage type buttons. These are not, I don't think these are actually vintage. I think they just are recreations, but they are leather that's kind of wrapped around a metal shank button. And so it is a shank button, which I actually really enjoy shank buttons for cable knit or any knit piece, because I find that it makes them fit really well and really flat, where when I've used normal buttons on cardigans that are hand knit, because the fabric is thicker, it doesn't fit really well, and the button like smushes down the fabric, which is probably just me not sewing the buttons on loose enough, but that's just my own fault. And this is kind of an idiot-proof way to prevent that from happening. So yeah, and then on the inside, I just whip stitched down a piece of ribbon, and this I find helpful to add a little bit of reinforcement to the button band itself, because there's a lot of wear and tear on buttons, and also to give the button something other than just the fabric of the cardigan to hold on to and really grasp. So yeah, I really love it. I have been wearing it open like this. I've been wearing it all buttoned up, and it's so warm. Today is a beautiful, beautiful spring day, and so I don't feel like I really need it all buttoned up, but I have gotten to wear it a couple times with it all buttoned up, and it is so warm and so comfy, and I'm still just obsessed with this. Like, I love it so much. Yeah. The only other handmade thing I'm wearing is a craft that I haven't really showed off before, but you've probably seen without knowing it, but it's these earrings that I have. So I made these during medical school. I have a very close friend. We're just getting up and personal here, aren't we? Anyway, I'm so weird. I don't know why anybody watches this. I feel so bizarre all the time, but you know, that's just the way it is. Anyway, these earrings are metalsmithing, which is something that I learned, silversmithing in particular, is a skill that I learned with a very good friend of mine, Greta, who is my best friend from medical school, and I miss her. She lives now in Minnesota, and I definitely want to go visit her as soon as I can. It's, you know, now that I'm vaccinated, I'm feeling much more willing to travel and see different parts of the world and visit friends and things like that. And she is a healthcare worker as well. She's a doctor. And so visiting her feels very safe. But anyway, her grandfather, she has like such an interesting story. So her family are Mennonite, and her grandfather was a silversmith. And so he left her a lot of silversmithing tools and some materials as well. So we actually went to a sort of like rock and stone store and bought these beautiful stones, which are matching. and made earrings out of them. I feel like I'm getting really close. You can see that I still have this pimple here, you know, it's still there, still there. But yeah, the reason why I say you've probably seen me with this craft is that actually my wedding band I made as well. So this is just a piece of hammered silver that I made with Greta, and I also made my husband's wedding ring as well. So I wear that every day, but I love these. These are probably my favorite earrings of all time and a very treasured piece. I wore them on my wedding day, and yeah, just wanted to show those off. So let's move into some crafting talk. I have a lot to talk about and a lot to show, but I also feel like it's not that fun except for the last one. So we'll save the best for last, shall we? I will start off with this piece. So this is the Ranunculus by Midori Hirose. I think that's how you pronounce it, or Knit Midori Cafe. I can't remember what they go by. But this is a pattern that literally everybody knows. Like, it is very, very famous and everybody had knit it but me, and I decided to finally knit it. So I am knitting this beautiful pattern out of Biche et Bouche Le Gros Mohair, which is a DK weight mohair silk yarn. It is absolutely beautiful. This is just in their black colorway, and I have made a lot of progress. So last time I showed this to you, I think I was part of the way down the body. It's blowing out a little bit because it's black, but I feel like that actually allows you to see the beautiful lace and texture motif around the yoke. So I have finished the body and cast on and started the sleeve. So this has been a labor of love. I would say that the whole body, I was like, I love this so much. And even, you know, into the ribbing, it is a long, twisted rib, but I have been obsessed with it. I literally was obsessed with it until I got to the sleeves. And here is the thing, okay? And I guess I should say, I did knit this, I believe, a little bit longer than the pattern calls for because it's so wide that oversized for me that I wanted it to be cropped, but not like crazy cropped. So I did knit it a little bit longer, and I've moved on to knitting the sleeves. And you know, you can see I'm knitting these on DPNs. This is my first time ever using DPNs, and I will say that I like it better than I thought I would. And I thought that I would have all of these troubles at the joins with having like ladders or things like that, and none of those things have happened. Like, it has actually been very smooth sailing, and I think is a very intuitive and straightforward way to knit small circumference. However, I find it so much more fiddly than just knitting in the round on small circumference. So my preferred small circumference knitting in the round method is using small circulars. So generally I have 12 and 9 inch circulars that I use to knit sleeves. And in the beginning of the sleeve, I'm generally using a 12-inch circular until I get closer down to the cuff, and then I usually switch to a 9-inch circular. And throughout the couple of years that I have been knitting, I've just slowly accumulated most of the sizes for knitting small circumference in the round in the weights that I generally use, which for me, most of the time I'm knitting in like a US 8 or below. So I have pretty much every size or close to it where I can kind of fudge it a little bit in those sizes. However, I don't have them in a US 10, and I could not find it anywhere. So I am a huge fan of ChiaoGoo needles. I love them. They're by far my favorite. I think the cord is like magnifique. And I feel like they don't make US 10s in 12 or 9 millimeter, which like, it makes sense that they wouldn't make it in a 9 millimeter, like at that, or 9 inch. At that point, it's like, just like, that would be ridiculous because they would be these huge needles connected to this tiny little thing. But I do feel like the 12-inch ones would make sense. So anyway, I swear they don't exist, unless I'm wrong, but like I spent a pretty considerable amount of time looking for these and could not find them anywhere. So I've been forced to use DPNs. And while it is fun to learn a new skill and practice a new skill, it has taken me so long to knit this much on a sleeve because I just don't enjoy the process. And I could do magic loop, could definitely do magic loop, also don't like magic loop. Like, I feel like I'm just being so picky and kind of ridiculous about it, but anyway, I really want to finish this because I think I will wear this constantly. Like, I think it's something that I will wear over and over and over again, and because it's black, it's so versatile, and because it's kind of this open gauge, it will be great for the summer and the spring. But hopefully pray for me, you know, like, let's do this together. Why don't I pick up something that's really bothering me, you pick up something that's annoying you, and we'll just do it together. It will just be done. And I think the hard thing is that there are other things I can knit that are very enjoyable and provide a lot of fun. And so it's just not really the thing that I reach for when I want to knit. Let me be right back. I need to grab a beverage. I poured myself this cup of kombucha and I forgot to bring it over. So yeah, that's all that I really have to say about that. I'm really, really enjoying it. I tried it on before I cast on for the sleeves and I love it. I love the way it fits. I love that it's kind of see-through and sexy. I can like foresee myself knitting some beautiful bralettes and wearing them under there and just embracing the 30s body, you know, like who cares that you can see my bra when I'm not at work, you know? Anyway. Of course, I could never wear anything like that at work, but I could wear it with a camisole under it, which I think would also look very classy and beautiful. So anyhow, the other sweater that I have been working on is the Weatherall or Weatherell by Kiyomi Bergen. And this is a pattern that I learned about from Nuga Bar, which is an amazing YouTuber who does a lot of episodes in Korean. And y'all, like, even though I don't know what she's saying, the Korean language is so beautiful that sometimes I like to just put it on in the background and like watch her beautiful knits go by and hear her talk about it in a language that I don't understand Korean, but it's so pretty. Oh, it's gorgeous. Anyway, highly recommend her podcast, but this is the Weatherall by Kiyomi Bergen, and it is a bottom-up cardigan that has some colorwork detailing on the sleeves as well as a beautiful yoke detail. So right now I'm just knitting away on this sort of gray blob, which after knitting this, I'm a little over gray, but you know, I'm excited. I feel like bottom-up sweaters are so fun because I can feel myself just being like, go, 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 because then you'll get to this beautiful red top and it will be amazing. So yeah, I am knitting this. Let me grab the second color. So I am knitting this out of Pletalopi by Istex, and it is a very interesting yarn that is essentially just pencil roving. So this is a yarn that I feel like a lot of people have seen before. It's my first time ever using it, and it comes in these plates of essentially just pencil roving that is very friable. However, when you knit it, the staple lengths of the wool are so long that it becomes very sturdy once you've knit it. And I'm knitting this out of two different colors. This is, I believe, the just like beige heather color, and then the detail will be out of this carmine red heather. So I am so excited. It will definitely be oversized, big. I want it to be something really quite oversized, kind of longer. A lot of the hand knits that I have are cropped, and I want this to actually be a little bit longer, not too long, but a little bit longer and oversized and really comfy. So right now I'm just knitting away. You can see I have a Progress Keeper, which I moved this morning. I was working on, I have to take another board exam. And so I'm working on practice problems for that. And I find that while I'm reading through the answers, I can knit on just straight stockinette. And so I've been moving this up, and I have my little Hagrid Progress Keeper on there, which I'm obsessed with. He has his little pink umbrella, which I think is so cute, and that is by Simply Serving. But I love this. I think that this yarn is really beautiful. It has this really amazing hairiness to it that like has the potential to be incredibly itchy, but I don't know. I have such a high tolerance for rustic yarns that I don't have any issue with it. The other thing that I have been hearing about, I watched the Knitting Traditions podcast, and she is knitting a shawl out of this same yarn. And it's interesting because she was kind of talking about her yarn breaking as she knits with it. However, for me, truthfully, I am such a loose knitter that I have no issue at all with this. I have not had it break once. Definitely the cast on was a challenge. And I did have to cast on twice because the first time it was like an absolute disaster. But the second time, you have to be incredibly loose with the cast on. And then after that, I have had no issues at all. It's definitely something where I'm consciously pulling it off of the plate and making sure that I am being loose with it. But I don't know. I think like this yarn would be like a really good gauge on like if you need to relax. Which, like, as someone who has generalized anxiety, I'm saying this with just like love and compassion for you. But if it's breaking on you a lot, like perhaps do a breathing exercise and keep knitting and see if that helps. Yeah, I don't know. Who knows? I'm just being facetious. It doesn't break on me, and I really enjoyed knitting with it. I do think that it's incredibly rustic. It doesn't bother me at all, but if you are not gonna be okay with any rustic yarns, then this would not be the yarn for you. But yeah, so that is the Weatherelle by Kiyomi Bergen. And then the last thing I've been working on has taken the majority of my knitting time. And that is the absolutely beautiful Spring Intentions wrap by Kat Weaver. Oh, I'm obsessed with this, you guys. So essentially what this is, for those of you who don't know, is Kat Weaver, who is the Heather and Hops podcast. She is hosting a knit along where we all knit a wrap together. And I believe, I can't remember the yarn company, but there is a yarn company out of the United Kingdom that put together kits for this particular wrap. And what it is starting at the spring equinox, we got the first week's worth of the pattern, and then we have gotten every Saturday. So yesterday, or this morning, early this morning, we got the second iteration, the second bit of the pattern, and it has been so rewarding. I think it's been very meditative, and Kat has also written up beautiful words and intentions for each week and things for you to kind of meditate on and think about and reflect on. And for me, reflection is a huge part of this year. That's part of the reason why I started this video journal, is to give myself the opportunity to reflect on what I'm reading and what I'm experiencing at work and what I'm making and how all of those parts of my life are intertwined, as well as things that are completely not about reading and crafting and work. So I have just really enjoyed this. It's extremely meditative. It is just purls and knits in various different ways, and it's creating the most beautiful pattern. And the thing that I've found really, really rewarding about it is just seeing the different colors that I've chosen and how they play together. In the beginning of the cowl, Kat did sort of draw out a really beautiful schematic where you can kind of color in and think about your colors before you cast on. However, for me, I have really just been knitting and picking up colors as I'm drawn to them. And it's interesting, like while I'm knitting, I'm thinking about what is the next color that I want to add to this piece. And I actually think that I might add one more repeat, so kind of one more block, because I do have more colors than what the pattern calls for. And I think adding one block on either side would continue to make it even. And I think it would just be a beautiful, even longer kind of wrap. And yeah, so I think I might do that because why not? Like, I'm just enjoying it so much. But I am knitting this out of many different kinds of yarn. So far, I am knitting this out of this, which is, this is Tuku wool, and I don't remember the colorway, but it's this really beautiful kind of peachy pink color, as well as this is leftover from a recent knit that I did. This is Fiber for the People in the Harbor colorway. And then a few different colors of Jamieson and Smith in their 2-ply yarn. So this is the one that I'm knitting with right now, which is this really beautiful lilac color, very light lavender color that I think is called Geode, or maybe just Fancy Tiger Crafts calls it that. And then I have a few different colors of this. Which are these, and some gray. I don't know why I'm showing you. You'll see all of these. And then I also have this Holst Garn, which is a darker brown than this, that I think would be really beautiful. And so essentially I am knitting this. The color inspiration for me was really about springtime in the desert. And the desert in the American West is this incredibly beautiful place. And I just think it's gorgeous. It really reminds me of spring. And so I think with the weather changing, I am just so excited about knitting on this because it just feels so spring-like. So anyway, this is the first week. So I think up to the start of this sort of square motif was the first week. And I just really love how these colors are playing into one another. And then you can see I have finished the first little motif in this lilac and then started in this knit purl textured bit, and it's so beautiful. I really love it. So yeah, I'm trying to decide what I want to do next. I think right now, so after this we go into another sort of small stripe, and then I think it goes into another large stripe. And what I think I'm going to do is do this brown and then go into this blue. And part of me wants to do that because I do think these clash a little bit, and I'm here for it. Like, I kind of want it to clash. I think that it will look so kind of beautiful and unexpected. So that's the plan right now. We'll see. Let me know if you think that a different color combination would be better, but I'm just really loving this. It's everything. And it has my little Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone Progress Keeper on it. So I'm loving it. I think it will go with so much. I actually think this, with this black ranunculus, I'm here for it, here for it. So yeah, this is bringing me so much joy. We have a Discord thread and there are little knit nights and things like that. So it's been a really fun thing to be part of. Honestly, I haven't really had time to spend a ton of time on the Discord stuff, but I want to. It's my intention to do so. And this is the Spring Intentions Cal, so hopefully that will come to fruition, but I've just been so busy at work that it's been hard, but this is bringing me so much joy, and I think that I will really enjoy knitting this over my night shifts to come. So yeah, so that is all that I have been knitting on lately. And so with that, I will just move on to some bookish talk. You guys, I have read so many books. I honestly was like, I need to record today, not so much because I've done a lot of knitting, even though I do feel like I've done a lot of knitting, but I'm kind of at that point in my projects where it's not that fun for people to see them, I don't think, because it's kind of like, you know, what's another inch on a gray blob, you know, but I was like, I need to record because I read so many books that it's like gonna get out of hand. So yeah, I have 4 books to talk about. Really 5 books. I have 4 books that I've finished and then 1 book that I'm in the middle of right now. Well, 2 books that I'm in the middle of, but only 1 of which I'm going to talk about. Anyhow, let's talk about the books. Oh, you guys, I have been reading some amazing things lately. So let's talk about these 2 books. These are the 2 books that I have finished reading the most recently. So the first one is so good. Oh my God. This is The Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse. Just look at that cover. This is a fantastic fantasy novel. It is the first in a new trilogy written by this incredible author. And it is based off of the pre-Columbian Americas. And it is so good. I fucking loved it. Like, it's so good. I am trying to make everybody read this book. And one thing that I think is really valuable is to hear the author's perspective on her inspiration for this novel. And this author is an author who I believe was on a lawyer in the Navajo Supreme Court and has a lot of experience with Indigenous communities. And I believe is married to an Indigenous man. I'm not sure if she's Indigenous herself, but has dedicated her life to this culture. And it's something that's very near and dear to my heart because I have family in the Sioux tribe. And so Indigenous cultures are something that I grew up with and really inspired by and really love and find to be incredibly valuable. And so to have a story written by someone with lived experience about a culture that is so underrepresented in literature, but also particularly in fantasy, was amazing. And so I just wanted to read this bit, and it won't give anything away. This is like totally spoiler free, but it just sort of talks about her inspiration for this novel. I've always wanted to write an epic fantasy with the scope, scale, magic, and intrigue I found in my favorites of the genre, and set in a fictional secondary world inspired by the pre-Columbian cultures of the Americas. So much of epic fantasy is set in analogues of Western Europe that I think most readers believe that all fantasy must be set in a fake England in order to even be considered epic. Happily, there seem to be more and more epics set in secondary worlds influenced by various cultures in Eastern Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. But it still seems incredibly rare to find a fantasy inspired by the Americas. I think part of the reason is the persistent myth that the indigenous cultures pre-conquest were primitive and had little to offer, when the opposite is true. Here were master architects who built massive pyramids and rivaled anything in Egypt, and created citywide sewer systems when London was still tossing its waste in the streets. Here they built high-rises that housed thousands. Here they tracked the equinox, the solstice, and the movement of the heavens with stunning accuracy. They wove cotton and traded turquoise and shell and feathers and cacao along trade routes that stretched across the continents. They lived and laughed and loved. They were, in a word, epic. literal goosebumps. It was just such a mic drop. Oh God, it was so good. Please read this. If you are at all interested in fantasy, you'll love this. Like, it is incredible. So yeah, I read this, gave this 5 out of 5 stars, was obsessed with it, and made everybody read it. And then I moved on to yet another 5 out of 5 star book. This is The Heart's Invisible Furies by John Boyne. I think I was talking about this book in my last podcast, but I will insert here a video recording of me reading this that is very embarrassing. Oh my God. Whoa. This book is so good. I've laughed so many times. I've cried. Oh my fucking God, it's so good. Please read this book. It's so good. It's the best book I've read in a really long time. Please read it. It's so good. So yeah, The Heart's Invisible Furies is incredible. It follows a man named Cyril Avery from when he is in his mother's womb all the way through his entire life, and sort of checks in with him about every 7 years. And it's really a character-driven novel about a man who is gay growing up in Ireland in the 1950s and going through his whole life and the sort of tumultuous parts of his life and the beautiful parts of his life and his friendships and his loves and his relationships with his family. And it's so quirky and so funny, but also so sad at times. There's, you know, horrible things that he experiences as a man living through this world. It touches on hate crimes. It touches on the AIDS epidemic, the plague, and it's so beautiful and so heartfelt and witty and funny. It has everything. It's so, so beautiful. And I think for me, a little bit about my life is that my grandfather was gay and had a very, very difficult life. My grandfather was Irish. Both of his parents were born, I believe, in Ireland, and my grandfather was born in the United States, but had, you know, a little bit of a brogue from my grandparents and just like how he learned to speak. And he grew up in a very Catholic world. And my family has always had an interesting and challenging relationship with the church because of the way that my grandfather was treated. My grandfather got electric shock therapy. He was in and out of asylums and things like that, and had a really, really challenging life. In the end, it was really beautiful. I had 2 grandfathers, and he was able to embrace his life and his true self. But I think because of that, and because of my own personal family history with this subject matter, it was a really beautiful thing to read, and I think gave me a little bit more understanding about my grandfather and the things that he likely lived through. And so, gosh, it was so, so beautiful. I highly, highly recommend it. It made me laugh. It made me cry. It was fantastic. Highly, highly recommend. So yeah, I was just like on a roll reading these amazing novels, and it just kept on coming. The next novel I read, I borrowed from my library, and that is Act Your Age, Eve Brown by Talia Hibbert. And this was an incredible addition to the Talia Hibbert series about the Brown sisters. So the first one is about Chloe Brown, the second one is about Dani Brown, and this one is about Eve Brown, the youngest sibling. And it was so fun. I think that it's a love story, so, you know, it's essentially about this woman who, you know, she's kind of lost, like we all are in our like 20s and 30s, and she doesn't really know what she's going to do with her life, and her parents have been kind of funding her life for a while and want to give her like one last little push to kind of act her age and give her kind of an ultimatum that she needs to either work in one of their jobs or they're going to kind of cut her off. And she decides to go out on her own, and she ends up working at a B&B as a chef. And the owner of the B&B is this wonderful man who is autistic, and there's an immediate connection, and there's such a beautiful kind of hate to love, but like friendship to love romance, and it was so fun. It's everything that you want and more in a romance novel. It has great representation of, you know, having people of various different ways in which their brains work, and I just thought that it was so fascinating to see the different spectrums of autism that were represented in this book, and it was just beautiful. It was so fun, and I think one thing that I love about Talia Hibbert is not shying away from things like chronic pain and disability and mental illness and you know, different ways that brains work, and she doesn't shy away from any of that, but she just brings so much joy. And I think like it's such a beautiful and revolutionary thing to just talk about people who are different and show their joy and the beautiful things that they bring to the world. And yeah, it's great. So highly recommend, highly recommend. I've just been on a roll, you guys. Like this last week, I was just, everything I was reading was just incredible. So yeah, please read that. I highly recommend all three novels in this series. They are all amazing. They all bring something new and different to the table. There's so much joy, and yeah, it's great. Please, if you're looking for something fun, read those books. They're so good. And the last thing I read was The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead. And this was kind of on the opposite side, but equally as amazing. So honestly, I feel like I've given all of the books. I gave Eve Brown a 4-star just because at 5-star, I sort of like remain for things that were like, ugh. And while Eve Brown was incredible, it wasn't like life-changing. The Nickel Boys was another 5 out of 5. And like, honestly, like I feel like I've had a few duds recently, so having so many 5 out of 5 books in 1 week or a couple weeks has been incredible. The Nickel Boys is by Colson Whitehead, which I have read The Underground Railroad by him as well, which was another absolutely beautiful and fantastic book. The Nickel Boys follows the lives and stories of mainly 2 boys who are sent to the Nickel Academy, which is sort of a correctional school for boys that was running in the Jim Crow era South. So it takes place in Florida in the sort of Jim Crow era. And it's so interesting because the book starts off with kind of the finding of multiple dead bodies and sort of a unmarked cemetery that is near this Nickel Academy. And then it comes to light all of the absolutely horrific and terrifying things that were going on in this academy. And essentially it follows 2 boys, one named Turner and one named, Elson, I think? Oh, I'm just like totally blanked on the name of the main person. Anyway, so it follows these 2 boys, Elwood. I was like, this is driving me crazy. And essentially, Elwood is this really high-achieving, really bright boy who gets wrongfully accused of a crime and sent to the Nickel Academy. And it's about his life there and the horrible, horrible things that happen to him. And it is truly a horror. It's interesting because I was talking to a close friend of mine who is in the process of writing a fantasy novel right now, and he reads a lot of fantasy, a lot of sci-fi, horror, lots of different things and lots of different genres. And we were talking about how I feel like there are certain genres that are like lesser genres, you know? There's like literary fiction, and then there's like horror or like sci-fi or fantasy, and I feel like they're not kind of held to the same esteem. And it's so interesting because The Nickel Boys is considered literary fiction. However, I would say that this novel is a horror novel. And to call it literary fiction is true because it is also that, but it is horror. It is straight up horror. It is absolutely fucking terrifying. And what's even more terrifying is that it is based off of a school where this was actually happening. It's not like by any means a true story, but it is heavily inspired by real events. And so, you know, I think just, to me, it's kind of semantic, like, is it literary fiction or is it horror? But I think giving the proper words to things are important. And this is a horror novel that won the Pulitzer Prize. So other horror novels can do equally beautiful and amazing things. It's, you know, even like Beloved, I feel like Beloved is a horror novel as well. And Jane Eyre, in a lot of ways, is a thriller or horror novel. Anyway, doesn't matter, but it's just interesting how we like to pigeonhole certain genres into being not as academic, where, you know, this novel that was written by Colson Whitehead that is absolutely beautiful is a horror novel and won the Pulitzer Prize and absolutely deserved to. It was incredible. I would say this book is horrifying but also uplifting. It shows the love and friendship between two boys who are sort of trying to survive this horrific space together. It shows the love of family, but it also shows generational trauma and racism and horrific abuse to children. So take it with knowing that in mind. But it's incredible. I really, really enjoyed it. I thought that it was beautifully written, of course. I mean, Colson Whitehead is a master of the craft. However, it was also, you know, just a really interesting read. So highly recommend that. Honestly, all of the books that I read this month, magnifique, like so good. So yeah, I am gonna stop recording now so that I can head over to my in-laws' house and play with my little niece because we're all vaccinated now. So we get to do that, which is incredible. It's coming to an end. It's ending. Anyway, I am going into the cold, dark nights, and so I'm not sure when I'll be able to record again, but hopefully it will be soon. And until then, happy knitting, happy reading, and please, please continue to take care of yourself and take care of those around you. All right, bye.